Welcome to the She Wins podcast. I am your host, Elisa Devine, award-winning and best-selling author. When one woman tells her story, it inspires more women to do the same. Domestic violence thrives in secrecy. So to eliminate it, we tell our stories, we open the conversations, and we identify changes to be made. And that is what we are doing here today. Lovern Gordon, I am super excited to get to talk with you today. We've had the pleasure of getting to meet in person several times and working together. And
Yes.
you were also featured in my first anthology, #SheWins.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Elisa.
Of course. How are you?
I am well. I am well. No complaints after God. So excited to be here and to be talking with you and to hear you name out all of the sort of the connections that we have and have had over the years is certainly amazing. We've certainly come together, like together,
Yeah.
within the last few years, and I'm really happy about that.
Yes. It's awesome. I love our connection.
Yeah, me too.
Well, I have your book here.
Ah,
Yes.
so
Yes.
awesome.
I have your book. I am planning to read it this weekend, actually.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, I'm taking the weekend off. The kids are in school now, and the other ones are away at college. So,
Oh, so awesome. Thank you, Elisa.
yes, and I want to ask you about the book,
Yeah.
and let's talk about that. But first, let's let people in to know a little bit about how you got to writing a book.
Yeah.
Now, you have a history of abuse beginning as a child,
Yes.
and your father was abusive to your mother, and
Some of our
and,
siblings.
yeah, and I know that you said that you would not be in an abusive relationship yourself. Can you tell us what happened, that led you to that, and then to have difficulty getting out of it too? Because I really think we need to talk about that, because there are people that say, oh, that would never happen to me,
Mm-hmm.
and then it does. So like,
Right.
what is what is it?
Yeah, I think for me, I lived in Trinidad with my parents till I was 15. And for me, throughout that time, again, like you said, continuously saying that it would never be me, I had developed this idea of what a victim had looked like based on what my mother had experienced, as well as other women in our community at the time were going through. Every other house, there was a husband beating on their wife, or a spouse or a partner beating on their girlfriend. And, even though, again, you equate that with each of these women being financially dependent on their partners, as being weak for staying around and sticking it out, for being in love, quote unquote, with these men. Having those ideas in your head, you sort of take yourself away from that, not realizing that all of the things that you've seen, that you've witnessed, they register subconsciously. And somehow down the line, those subconscious thoughts begin to marry with reality. And I was no exception. And so what my reality was I saw a lot of the attributes that my father had possessed in this particular guy that I was now dating, and was so infatuated with me, and presented this level of attention, this level of what I thought was caring, this level of love. also married with a high level of jealousy and possessiveness that, again, all in my head at the time just meant that he cared. And so what I do want to say is that children who grew up in abusive homes, right, they tend to go on most times to become abusive themselves, victims, and or, on the rare, you know, the straight and narrow. They don't like confrontation, or they don't want anything to do with someone trying to come at them in a wrong way.
Right.
And so what we don't understand is that when children are in these, types of settings, is that we don't get to see how our parents got together. We don't get to see the beginning. For me, I came as the third child of 5 children in the thick of things, when things were on a high. He had been doing this to her for many years prior. I didn't get to see that level of possessiveness. I didn't get to see that level of jealousy when they were just starting out. And so all I knew of what abusive relationships looked like was what I saw. And that was physical attacks, verbal onslaughts, emotional distress, and abuse. And so by the time I met this guy, his tactics, I began to learn later, were the same as my father's. When I finally got to sit down with my mother and ask her, why did you even get together with someone like our father? And so, not, beginning to understand that the tactics are just the same, that was really eye-opening for me, to understand that they operate from the same sort of textbook. And so dating this guy who was so attentive, so caring, always wanted to know where I was, always checking in to make sure I was where I said I was, and then eventually isolating me, came as a surprise. And the entire time that I was in this relationship, and, after the first slap, and I accepted that first apology, which is where the cycle of abuse really started to repeat, believing that he, when he said it would never happen again, that he loved me so much that I made him do or act this way.
Yeah.
And so, that's really how the cycle started. And, it wasn't really hard to repeat the cycle, because in that moment of accepting that first apology, I equated what had happened to me with what my mother had went through. But I saw myself still separate from that, right? My mother was, again, uneducated at the time, financially dependent on our father. I was working an entry-level job in corporate America. I was dependent on myself. I was on my way to being college educated. Like, I was separate from what I thought she was, weak and in love with somebody that, that commandeered everything that she did on a day-to-day basis. And so, in comparing those two situations, I kept saying that it's not that bad, and it's not what she went through. It was just a slap, right? The first slap was just a slap. And here he is apologizing to me with 24 purple roses, a slew of voice messages that said he was sorry. I heard it in his voice. He was very tearful over the phone when I finally called him back. And here he was over the phone saying that, again, I love you, and, it's because I love you that you make me act this way, not accepting, responsibility for what he had done to me.
Right.
But I took it. I took that level of guilt at 21, after the first slap happened, and that's where the cycle of abuse started. Many people oftentimes ask, how do these relationships even start? How do people let themselves, be treated this way? And I can succinctly tell you that there is, a very fine line that, sort of, it becomes blinding at that point, when you're like, well, I'm not that bad. It happened to her way worse. She was getting, machete attacks and beer bottle attacks. This was just a slap. Like, you begin to make excuses almost at the very beginning, because this person has showed you a level, at least for me, it was 3 months of charm and articulateness and lavish dates, and things were great. And so by the time this happens, even though he's been gradually grooming me to accept the types of things that he was already doing, that again, the constant check-ins, the jealousy about being on the phone with a male friend of mine for too long, being on the phone for too long with other girlfriends, like that level of of abuse was already he was already laying the ground in those 3 months. But it went over my head, because I just thought, hey, something's talking to me, my intuition's talking to me, but quiet down already, because this is a really good relationship otherwise.
Wow.
It's you kind of push those things aside, because you're thinking to yourself, this for me was my first serious relationship, so you're thinking lightning is not going to strike twice.
Right.
That's number one. Okay. At 21 years old, you think, well, okay, this is so great, and despite the little things that are sort of jarring at me, I'm going to dismiss those, because it's nothing to be worried about. It's nothing I should be concerned about. I really do need to make an effort to get off the phone when I'm talking to a guy. And maybe I should not even be talking to guy friends anymore, because I'm with this guy now, right? So all of these things, like I said, he was grooming me. And by the time the 3-month mark hit, and even though I said I was done in the beginning, by the time that apology came, I was ripe. I was ripe for the taking. I was ripe for accepting part of the blame for the slap that he gave me at the time. I was ripe for, dismissing his very bad, wrong behavior. I was ripe for all of it. And that then led to almost 2 years of abuse, where the physical, emotional, and verbal assaults only ramped up from there.
Well, I want to ask you a question, because you articulated something in a way that really activated something in me. And it was when you mentioned that, you didn't see how your parents met. Okay. Meaning, like, if we were to compare that with your abusive relationship at the time,
yeah.
Do you think that, if you had more information about how your parents met, do you think that maybe you could have come to, the realization that I was abusive sooner? Because I think that is really deceiving, that relationships are not abusive or not easily identifiable as abusive in the beginning, because there is that time of grooming. There is that time where everything feels really good.
Yeah.
Like, what, that's just so interesting, because, we don't really quite talk about those kinds of conversations, and it is hard to decipher. And especially being, you were at a young age. I was also at a very young age. And, according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, young people, 16 or 18 up to 24 are the most at risk.
Absolutely.
Because of that naiveness, maybe, and not knowing all the signs, not having experience in intimate relationships.
Yep, up until that point. Yeah. And I think, so I don't think that seeing the beginning of their relationship would have entirely dissuaded me from entering this type of relationship at 21. However, had there been awareness campaigns, now we're talking about Trinidad in the 80s, okay, is when I really knew myself. Born in 77, but really knew myself in the 80s. And so, it's a third world country. There is no, the term domestic violence wasn't even coined at that point on the island. We just knew that it was wrong. It was husbands beating their wives. And that's it. That's all we knew. And so had it been a different time where like now, my parents had met, there's awareness campaigns, you see sort of the beginning stages of where he's possessive, where she was once sort of this insane social butterfly. She goes from that to being, you have to be here at a certain time, make sure you come back at this time, because if not, I'm questioning it. Like all of these things coupled, like in this day and age, yes, I think seeing that coupled with awareness campaigns, coupled with the resources that are available for people to be able to access, sometimes, a lot of times online, I think absolutely, I think I would have been dissuaded from entering this type of relationship because I would have been more aware, right? And that's sort of my drive today, is just creating and keeping this issue in the forefront as much as possible to create awareness. And because when you know better, right, you do better. Oftentimes what we don't know, we don't know. And I did not know about the beginning of my parents' relationships. What I knew was what I knew. And that was the environment that was, you know, catered to us on a daily basis of, or every other day or every other week basis of abuse. We didn't know better, and what I knew of abuse even on television, I remember watching later down in my years, The Burning Bed with Farrah Fawcett. I don't know if you remember that movie. Yeah. And I just remember like, get away, the bad guy, but not necessarily that this partner, her husband, he was completely in the wrong. It was almost like in the movie, like you needed her to just be safe, but you weren't really focusing on all of the things that he had done to her. You looked at it as bad. And this is, again, my perspective. Like all the onus responsibility, I do believe oftentimes is put upon victims to realize their worth and realize that they shouldn't be in this situation and get yourself safe and all of these things, all of these questions, even like the one you just asked me, right? I mean, it's our responsibility as victims, right? Our society tells us that we're supposed to be aware of these signs. You were a child in this situation, but what is the question to the abuser? What is the question to these people that are harming us, to these people that are oftentimes not held accountable? We're often at the forefront holding the torch, saying, stop killing us, stop harming us. And, no onus responsibility oftentimes is not, the spotlight isn't on the abuser. And I think, for me, you mentioned that I wrote the book. Part of, for me was showing him in the book, showing my father, putting a face to what that looked like, who he was. It was really important to me to out. And I did get some pushback. And I know we'll get into the book, but I just want to hit on that very quickly, that, I got pushback from folks. Why are you putting, you were his golden child. He loved you. And, he was so proud of you. Yeah, but he also scarred me for life.
Right.
Yeah, my siblings. So there's that. And that's what I took away, in part from what, his legacy was. So anyway, I digress.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, about the ownership of responsibility, because, even though I'm always looking for like ways to, to teach people, to look out for themselves and to stand in their personal power, you are completely right in that there needs to be more responsibility on the people who are being abusive. And why are we not looking at, preventative measures for them to not be abusive, and so that is, a really important point. What is it that we're focusing on? And we cannot continue putting blame on the victims.
And then, not even necessarily blame, Elisa. For me, it's more so putting the responsibility of keeping yourself safe on us. It's the same with sexual assault, right? If you didn't wear that, you wouldn't be looked upon as somebody potentially that wants it. You shouldn't have worn that. Your hair shouldn't have been this way. Your blouse shouldn't be that open, right? And so that is just so important to me through the foundation work, is not just, because I do agree with you. We do have to give preventative measures to potential victims, to women who have never experienced this issue, so that they can be on alert all the time about the ways to, to sort of not travel down that road. However, we need to continue to involve the gender who 90% of the time is looked upon as the perpetrator, and that's men. And involving them in the conversation has been so important to me through the work that we do through Love Life Now. And granted, we only get to do that certain times during the year. I want to continue doing that because, again, they have a responsibility to talk to their peers, to talk to the younger boys in their space, to talk to their sons and the people that they see at the barbershop, or the people that they meet up on the basketball court or at the water bubble or at work. Like, they all have a responsibility to be in the know about what this issue entails and how they can be part of the solution.
Yeah.
I think we're spinning our heads and our wheels if we don't involve them or make it a point to make them aware of the things that, one in every 3 women are going through every single day. And it could potentially be their daughters. A lot of folks that I'm seeing on the book tour, they say it's, they've seen their mothers, their sisters, family members, colleagues, and they didn't know how to help. So, they're saying me too. So,
Right.
this, it just goes to show that this issue goes across the board and really has no barrier. So, anyway.
Exactly. Yes. Well, that's one of the aspects that I love about your foundation, Love Life Now.
Yeah.
And how long was it that you started that foundation? How long was it after you left your abusive relationship? And tell us what you do to include men in the conversation, because, I know of the white ribbon gala that you
Yes.
held, and the walking in heels. So tell us about those 2 events, how you include men, and how you got to that point of starting the foundation.
Yeah, and so it came by luck and
Okay.
chance, really. Obviously it was destined after God, but at this point in time, it was because 10 years post my abusive relationship that I had escaped, I was having dinner with some friends, girls' night, and one of them was starting a beauty pageant, and the other women said, "Lovern, you should take part in it. You should, you do great." I'm like, "No, not my deal, not interested." And they dared me some more, and I took the dare and entered the pageant, didn't take it seriously, ended up winning, and then had to go on to nationals in LA and ended up winning there as well. So now I have these 2 pageant titles, and I have to pick a platform to advocate for the year, and domestic violence was an easy choice. Obviously, I'd learned what the term was. I'd had some therapy over the years after leaving that relationship, and sort of, became familiar with what it was. And I was like, why not? In my community at the time, I had never seen awareness campaigns. I didn't know what resources were available. And I wanted to do more to highlight that. So that particular year, I hosted these initiatives. One of them was the walk in just a walk, really, at the time. And the other one was a community day where we asked all the men. I had recently become aware of what's called the White Ribbon Campaign, a nationwide campaign that asked more men to speak out against this issue of domestic violence. And so it started in Canada after one man massacred 14 women simply because he didn't like women. It was femicide, right?
Wow.
And the campaign came about shortly after that, started by some men who were outraged that this could even happen, and then quickly spread to the United States, and now is in many countries across the world: Australia, England, I believe Germany as well, but many countries host nationwide or national White Ribbon Day campaigns. And so I was like, why don't I bring this to my community? I have never known about this. And I know family and friends would want to know. So we brought together a group of men and they heard me out. And I was like, yay. And they took the White Ribbon Pledge, which in part says, from this day forward, I will no longer condone violence against women. And once the year was up with the pageant, and advocating in that sense, hosting initiatives, volunteering, we put on more throughout the year as well. But once the year was up, I really wanted to continue the work. And someone had said, you should start a nonprofit because that can help you with your mission. So I did. The following year, Love Life Now Foundation was formed, and it's now, this November will be 10 years that we've
Oh,
been.
that's incredible.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. 10 years that we've been doing this work, and I am just incredibly pumped that we're even still around, and that people are still listening to us, because that's what we want. A big part of, the foundation is to continue to create awareness through these initiatives that we think are fun and innovative. The community White Ribbon Day that I mentioned turned into a White Ribbon Night Gala the following year. And, men and women come, dressed up, and we have a dinner, but we have about 3 to 4 male speakers that get up in the front of the room and talk to the men specifically about the ways that they are being part of the solution and encouraging them to be part of the solution too. And at the end of the night, we have all the men in the room come to the front and take the White Ribbon Pledge. And it, again, in part, it sounds simple enough, but for women who have never even experienced the issue of domestic violence, for victims, for survivors that are in the audience, it is moving. A lot of them have never heard a man even utter a word about domestic violence, and to see these group of men, and saying that they want to be allies in this work is just, you can hear a pin drop. And it's so moving, and it's one of the biggest parts of the night that I always look forward to, because again, it just means so much. And the call to action is for them now to then take the message or the messages that resonated with them throughout the night, and then bring it back to their spaces, whether it be their sons, whether it be their colleagues. And I'm just incredibly excited that we're still here doing this work. It's humbling, it's gratifying, it's cathartic every single day. So I'm really pumped. And then the walk turned into a heal-a-thon, where we asked folks to put on their favorite pair of heels and walk a short distance in support of awareness. And it's a mile, and we walk on a busy street in a very busy city. And, people have awareness signs. One of the signs that stuck out to me 2 years ago when there was no COVID was real men beat eggs, not women. And it just was so awesome.
That's really cool.
Their awareness mandatory. Some come in kitten heels, some come in sneakers, but men have decided to start joining us within the last 3 years before COVID. And it's the funniest thing to see them in their Mary Janes and their wedge heels, walking the smile, kind of hobbling along, but they're doing it the entire way. And the idea really is, walk a mile in my shoes, right? The pain you're experiencing now is nothing compared to what victims have to go through when they are in these relationships and when they leave these relationships. So I'm just always excited when the walk happens. I cannot wait for it to resume, hopefully next year in person. But yeah, that's, part of what we do. Those are part of the initiatives that we host. Part of those proceeds that we raise from that night go back to a domestic violence shelter, who we feel are doing the frontline work every day to aid victims and survivors of abuse.
Well, Lovern, that is very inspiring, and I love the events that you create. And I'm going to be celebrating the 10 years with you in November for sure. Your dedication is very inspiring. Your commitment. So
thank you.
It does. That just speaks to your success.
Oh.
So,
I appreciate that. And you, the word success, that's a heavy one for me, because, a lot of people look at that as like accolades and awards and, whatever. It just, for me, Elisa, every single day is, a victim coming back or a survivor coming back and saying, we helped them, you know, through our Get Safe Fund, which is another initiative that helps victims when they just have recently left an abusive relationship and need a leg up with a financial expense. Part of the monies we raise also goes into what's called the Get Safe Fund, and it helps with, a domestic violence related expense. And so when the gratification and the success for me comes when folks come back and say, I got helped, or I'm here now because of that leg up, that, and it can be anywhere from $1 up to $500. I didn't become homeless because you gave me that hotel stay and I was able to go on to shelter from there. Paying that bill meant that I, was able to keep my car. Gas money that you gave me to get from Massachusetts to Ohio to get to my mother where I know I would be safe. Just all of these things. Yeah. Those are the successes for me
Right.
in doing this work, and I love it. Like, yeah. That's what drives me.
Yeah, it's
day in and day out.
Very satisfying. I always say that the real work is the things that you can't see.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's happen behind the scenes. And so, everyone's outer success that's visible, is one thing, but then we don't always see or talk about all of those little pieces that you mentioned in the day-to-day of the individual people and that you're helping. So I love that.
Thank you.
Makes it very real. Yeah.
Ah.
Okay, let's get into the legacy he left me.
The book
just wrote, and it was published in June.
Yes.
I can't wait to dive into it this weekend. I've seen you all over the country.
Oh my gosh.
With your book. Tell me what you're hearing on feedback, what people are saying to you. Tell me, how it's touching people, because I just want to know more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, real quick, the book came to me. So I was not looking to write a book per se, but a friend of mine in the former industry that I still dabble in, the banking and finance area, came to me and said his wife was starting up a publishing company that he was going to be a part of, and really thought that my story, which he had followed over the years, little clips of workshops that I've done on LinkedIn, he thought that it would be a good fit for their brand. And I said, what? And he said, yes, you. And, he asked me if I would be open to a conversation with his wife, and the chemistry was there, and, signed contracts in October and was writing in October and was done by January 1st. But, mute the doggy.
Yeah, I know. I mean, don't have that button.
I love it. But, it was just really exciting to be able to undertake this, what I call a love project. #SheWins was, the opening for me to be able to really express myself in writing about what my issue had looked like. And this was an even more expansive opportunity to sort of flesh out the details. Right. And I, initially thought that writing a book, I'd done it, for #SheWins, and I've talked about many times, many aspects of my story, but I didn't realize that, really fleshing out the details, like the the beginning of where it started, that it would have that much impact on me. And so, even in writing, I realized that there were things that I had not dealt with, even though I thought I had dealt with them. Okay. And so that resulted in insane PTSD I already suffer from, but it was on a level of 1,000. Brutal nightmares that I was waking up from cold sweats in anxiety through the roof. This stuff started to permeate, writing the book started to permeate in my daily life, and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And it was scary, and it was a roller coaster of emotions. And there were all these things that came together, even in the process of writing the book. And I sought a therapist. And by January, I got connected. I shopped around, right? Because
Yeah.
getting a therapist
Find
is
the
not
right
like
fit.
going, right, you got to find the right fit.
Yeah.
And so, that's one of the biggest things that's come from the experience of writing was, you know, dealing with or learning to deal with, really learning how to deal with the triggers of this trauma and understanding that they'll never go away. But we learn how to manage them, right?
Right.
So now I have a sounding board, a non-judgmental sounding board that I get to meet with once a week. And I'm a huge advocate for mental health now because I believe it's so incredibly important to be able to address that. That being said, the book was released on June 1st. And, even getting to print was just so crazy. I mean, shooting the cover, which as you have in front of you now, that in itself was a lot. They brought in a special effects person and a makeup person to do my face. And when you see the cover of the book, you'll understand that when I looked at my face in the mirror, it took me out. It was an emotional next 5 minutes, tears, and because I saw my mother, I saw myself, and the intent is really to show folks that even though we've gone through and we present so well on a day-to-day basis, there's so many scars, even though they're not visible. There's so many scars that we walk around with that we have to bury because society tells us that we have to be on point and together and okay, and okay, you're out now, so you're fine. And it's just not that. The most glamorous and even the most mundane folks are walking around with stuff. We all have stuff that we need to unpack. And so when the book was released, I had zero clue of what was in store. One, launching and hearing from people at the book launch what it meant to them, even just looking at the image, that was whoa. Then going on further book tours, so we've been in Arizona, Minnesota, various cities where I'm local from, Massachusetts, most recently New York and Pennsylvania, back to back. And across the board, to answer your question, it's a lot of folks are have, or I should say we are waiting for permission to tell their truth and to be able to present a little bit before I do book signings and talk about what this issue meant for me and now what it looks like on the now is so incredibly awesome, because again, people are getting that permission to come up and say me too. And not just women, because I'm encountering a lot of men on this tour. It is, men saying,
1 minute. I'm sorry. 1 minute.
yeah, so it's not only men, it's not only women that I'm seeing on the tour. I'm coming into contact with a lot of men. And after they hear me speak, it's because they're getting up and saying, my sister, my mother, I watched her go through this, my colleague, and I didn't know how to help. And so it just is opening up the conversation and making it comfortable to be able to talk about in very vulnerable spaces. And what I'm realizing is that, on this tour is that there are so many people just waiting for that permission, and that a national campaign may not give to them per se, right? That, a spokesperson wouldn't give to them per se, but that one-on-one convo has been so incredibly important to have, because again, people are feeling open enough to be able to say hashtag me too. So I've just been really grateful to be able to have the opportunity. Given my history, I shouldn't be here. Given my history, there's no way that I should have this voice at all, but here I am, and I don't take that for granted at all on any given day. So yeah, the book tour has been insane and surreal. That's the only word that I can really use to describe this entire experience, because that's what it's been. It's been surreal. The impact that I'm seeing from reviews that people are writing online, my God, people are dog earing or earmarking pages of the
Oh,
book because they're gems that stood out for them. And for me, it was really important, to not have per se a glossary of terms at the end, but to incorporate them throughout the story so that folks can know that this chapter had to do with, at the end, they can see what emotional abuse really means, to understand what the real terminology is of domestic violence in the very beginning, what the CDC coins as ACEs, and how that's what my childhood looked like, a series of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Marrying, parts of my story with gender stereotypes and what those look like from very early on and how those can be harming for, children coming up. Just, really giving gems throughout the story. And that for a lot of folks was really helpful because they were like, oh, I just read this chapter and she dealt with this and that's what that means. Like, that's what gaslighting is. Oh, okay. And it's giving that real life experience as opposed to, having it all at the end when you've sort of passed that piece. So that to me was incredibly important. And I'm just super excited that the quote unquote love project even happened, right? And was given the opportunity to do so because, yeah,
that's amazing.
it's all in one place. And, now, I don't have to, pull from pieces. It's all right there in one place, in the book. So
Yeah,
thank you for that.
I love that. And I want to mention the cover because as you were talking about it, it's so impactful,
Oh,
and I'm just going to say like half of your face you can tell, is beaten and bruised, and
yeah.
the other half has the appearance of normality. And
Yes.
isn't that so, I mean, it's just such a metaphor for
Yes.
what domestic violence can be because
Yes.
you cannot always see it.
No, you cannot.
And
But those scars are there.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just I was like, wow, wow.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
it just really it gives me chills, to
Man.
look at it and see it and to know you and to know what you've been through, how you came out on the other side of it, and what you're doing now, the people that you're helping.
Yeah.
I feel so blessed to know you. And,
Same here.
something that you said too, was really interesting about what you started to go through as you began writing your story, because I wrote my short story for hashtag She Wins Too, which is releasing soon. And,
Oh,
it took me a long time to get to the point, because I've written for a while and it was like, oh, I'll just, I'll write it. But every
right.
time I tried to do it, I couldn't.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
couldn't finish it. And it wasn't until I realized there were pieces yet that I still needed to address, that I
Yes.
still needed to heal. And I did the same thing as you. I sought out a new therapist
Amen.
and, was able to take my healing to another level too. So I just think that that's interesting. Anytime you're going to really dive into something and look at it closely, it just takes you to another level of healing, because I think it's layers, it's so many layers.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
a lot of times, we only get to the surface of it, and yet there's so much more that's underneath. So,
Yes.
I just really encourage people anytime, to write, to share their experiences, because each time it opens up, another layer, another.
Another layer. Yeah. Of unresolved stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and, again, I don't think that personally for me, and what I got from my therapist is that you will never be rid of the stuff. You learn how to manage that stuff. And I think, in writing and fleshing out, which is again so cathartic, but can also be a real process, a real
Right.
roller coaster of a ride. So yeah, I mean, I like I said, I don't think I was prepared for that piece of it. I thought it would be like being on a podcast, which, you
Right.
know, I have over the years been able to, you know, sort of get a handle or a rein on my emotions, even though I want to cry, you know, I I I didn't, you know,
Right.
and sometimes I would cry, but that's okay. Um, I thought it would be like that, right? I might cry a few times in writing this, especially my parts, but then as I began to connect the dots from my mother, part of the story is what I can't tell being a child, talk about being a child witness without telling her story, and then connecting those dots and talking to her one-on-one, talking to my older siblings who got the brunt of the child abuse, connecting those dots and really fleshing out the details and even my details, revisiting that, and you know, going to the courthouse to get a copy of my you know, restraining order, going back there, you know, going to the hospital to get a copy of my medical records, going back there, like those things were daunting because I really wanted to show people, you know, redacted pieces of, you know, of what these things look like. What is it to be 23 years old and entering a courthouse for the first time? What is it to be 23 and sitting in an ER room by yourself? And, you know, it just, you know, like I said, it was quite the process to be able to curate, but I'm a better woman for it because I'm in therapy. And you know, like I said, now it's more so of having non-judgmental sounding board. I'm sure for you, Elisa, as well, to be able to just throw everything and anything at, and part of my self-care. I know that word is thrown around a lot, but it really is part of my self-care for 1 hour a week, once a week, to be able to sit down and just be.
Yeah.
um, and not that I'm not being with you, because I'm being with you, but you know, to
Right.
be able to talk about, again, anything that is
Yeah.
on my mind, and get feedback.
Yeah.
So
And that's so important. And even, you know, we're very similar, or we're, you know, the same age,
yeah,
10, you know, 10 years plus out. And so, you know, that it still is a great idea to have that support.
absolutely, absolutely. And even if you've never, you know, it's not necessarily that you've gone through abuse or but any trauma, right, that
Right.
is sitting with you and has been sitting with you, I mean, there's just no greater gift that you can give yourself than to unpack it, to be released from it,
Yeah.
and understand that none of it was your fault. So again, mental health is wealth.
Yeah. I love it. Well, Lovern, thank you so much for, you know, spending time talking with me today. I always enjoy getting to catch up with you and have these important conversations, you know, that's so important. Why don't you tell us, you know, how people can find your book and connect with you, support your organization, Love Life Now?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the foundation is based out of Massachusetts, but we are nationwide in terms of being able to help. We're local as it relates to the initiatives that I talked about. But you can find us on the web at lovelifenow.org. Again, lovelifenow.org. You can get connected to our social media, which we're heavy on every other day, or sometimes every day, on the issue of awareness. And the book itself, you can also find via the website, but it also has its own website. It's called thelegacyheleftme.com. Again, thelegacyheleftme.com. And you can find links to that social media there as well. We are always heavy on the issue of awareness around the issue of domestic violence. So join us, if you please.
Absolutely. You will love it. All right, Lovern, thank you so much.
Thank you, Elisa.
Thanks so much for participating in the #SheWins conversation today. If you have questions you'd like me to answer on a future podcast, or if you're looking for advice, or if you're ready to tell your story, email info@elisadivine.com.